Welcome to this EU Today podcast. My name's Gary Cartwright. I'm the editor of EU Today. This episode begins in Antwerp, where artist and broadcaster Reijnders of the Cloudknitters art project sits down with the legendary American jazz pianist David Janeway shortly before David's performance at the Muze. This is one of Antwerp's longest established jazz clubs. Their 45-minute conversation ranges widely from David's childhood at the piano, the influence of Detroit's jazz tradition, improvisation, a career in psychiatry, spirituality, artificial intelligence, and the place of music and art in public life. You'll also hear some short passages from David Janeway's new album throughout this programme, but we're going to begin with the music, and then Leo in conversation with David.
So these are the Cloudknitters. I'm the Cloudknitter and I'm recording Janeway, David Janeway, is the correct spelling. So we are here now. It's Thursday, 14 May 2026, and we are in the Hilton Hotel. And since 21 years I have a program about art and culture on the alternative Radio Central. So David is gonna play this evening at Muze. Muze is one of the oldest jazz pubs from Antwerp. And I would like to know, are you born like a musician or did you learn it during your lifetime?
I would say, first of all, thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure to meet you and to learn more about your art and your show. I would say that I was born playing the piano because everyone in my family played the piano. Everyone, my parents, my grandparents, my sister. I had to fight to get to use the piano because it was always being played. So I started playing a toy piano when I was 3 or 4. And my mother saw that I was drawn to it. So she started some lessons when I was 4. And then when I was 5, she saw that I stayed with it and I was actually serious about it. And she started me with private lessons, classical lessons. And that's when I started to seriously learn how to play. And I studied classical until I was about 13 or 14, so about 8 years.
But do you think that other people are born like an artist? So you were lucky because you were born in an environment that gives you everything to become a musician, but other people, do you think that they are born like an artist or they can be taught like an artist?
That's a very good question. I don't think we choose. I'll put it that way. I think if we have it within us to create either art or music, it's not really a choice. It's just in our blood. You know, we have to do it. Now, if it's nurtured either through our teachers and our parents, well, then all the better. Then we have an opportunity for it to blossom. If we don't have that nurturing, then it is possible that it'll be dormant. You know what I mean? You know, understand that? Dormant would mean like undeveloped, you know, just
Yeah.
or let's say our parents want to steer us in another direction, like, oh, you know, I don't want you to become a musician or an artist. They want you to become, you know.
And do you think
I think it's both. I think it's. You know.
And do you think that art is important in society?
All I can do is laugh because I have always thought that the artists, poets, writers, the performing art, they are what save us. They save us from insanity. They save us from a life that is droll, mundane, dull, crude, vulgar. They allow us to explore the greatest heights of being. So I think it was Nietzsche who said there's something about that. Life without music is not worth living.
He was not yet in
It
my
wasn't Nietzsche. It was somebody else.
He was not yet in my program, so I don't know.
Yeah.
But I have a question to ask.
I would say in these times that we live in, the arts are even more important because they speak to the truth and they also speak to the freedom of expression, which is in jeopardy now all across the world. Freedom to express oneself without censorship and without political partisanship. So.
And who were the artists or the musicians that you were looking up when you were young or beginning or searching? Who were the artistical leaders for you in the beginning when you were not full grown like an artist?
Well, first it was classical. Arthur Rubinstein, Horowitz, the great Russian pianists, and Gould. I can't remember his first name. But then with jazz, I would say Oscar Peterson was one of my first early influences. My father took me to see Oscar Peterson when I was about 14. I would say that changed my life. I was playing rock and roll at that time in bands. And once I heard Oscar Peterson and other local jazz pianists, that changed my life. I never heard anything like that before.
And in which way does jazz music is different from other music?
I felt a little stifled after a while having to, with classical, having to play exactly what's written on the paper and not being able to improvise at all. And from a very early age, I started to improvise, even within rock and roll. It was that during those times, the Grateful Dead and other bands were experimenting with jamming, like long extended jams. And I was into that. So the improvisation is the key. I felt I needed to improvise, and I started to improvise. And jazz was the vehicle that allows that. And so it's a unique art form in that it requires classical training, but it also an adherence to a form. But integral to jazz is the improvisation.
But I can imagine that not everybody has the talent to improvise. That some are nervous to start.
Yeah,
looking for the freedom to whatever can happen.
I think that's true. I think that many people feel stifled, or they don't have the confidence to just go for it. Just to express ourselves fully without some kind of constraint. And but I never felt that way. I felt like it just was a natural process to explore. just play and see what sounds came out and go with it.
But this jazz music, isn't it original, not from Africa?
Yes, I was lucky that I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, where because of the Great Migration, there was this huge influx of Afro-Americans from the South who came up to Detroit, Michigan, to work in the auto industry. They came to other northern cities like Chicago and Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. And so the Afro-American culture in Detroit was there from the early 1900s. And they had a very advanced and developed culture through the music, through the black church, gospel. There was swing, jazz, and then later with bebop, and then later with Motown. And the jazz musicians in Detroit were the musicians on all of the Motown records. They were the Motown sound. So growing up in that environment, I had exposure to some of the greatest music, but all coming from the Afro-American experience and culture.
Once I was interviewing an American jazz musician, he was called Big Black, and he told me that they called it S music, but for the white people it was a little bit too shocking, so they changed it to jazz music. That's what they told me.
Well, for me, when I first, not only Oscar Peterson, but when I started going to smaller jazz clubs, I was really transformed by the emotional impact of the music, just how deep, it made me feel. It moved me, both blues and jazz, and so it was, totally inspiring to be exposed to that, and that's the only music that I wanted to study after that experience.
Which kind of music are you now, how do you say it, nieuwsgierig?
Curious about.
Curious about?
Well, because of the experience that I had growing up, I'm very tied to the traditional jazz, going back to bebop, swing era, all of the masters in jazz, like in jazz piano, Oscar Peterson, Bud Powell, Thelonious Monk, Herbie Hancock, later generations, Chick Corea. So I feel very much a part of that stream, right? That legacy, and wanting to honor that tradition. So I like to listen to other younger jazz pianists that are doing that. Like Sullivan Fortner is somebody who I think is one of the greats right now.
What's his name?
Sullivan Fortner, and Isaiah Thompson. So there are younger jazz pianists that are coming up that are really carrying the torch for that.
Charlie Parker, he was living in New York, eh? Charlie Parker.
Yeah.
Lower East Side Manhattan.
But originally from Kansas City, but then he moved to New York. So New York has always been the mecca for jazz. And so for me, I was also drawn to New York, and I moved there when I was 23 from Detroit. And then that was a whole nother education, being around the greats that were still alive at that time, who I could hear and learn from and sometimes play with.
Gary told me that you were also a scientist, but then it turned out that you worked like a psychiatrist.
Yeah, so I always had two passions in my life, science and music. And that's because my father and his father were scientists. So I was, I was definitely inspired by conversations that we had all the time about science. So I pursued both an education in science, and then I was drawn to the life sciences, biology, chemistry. And when I moved to New York when I was 23, I was a full-time musician for 4 years. And then I decided to apply to medical school. And I went back to school when I was 27. And then decided to go into psychiatry, and was a practicing psychiatrist for 30 years. Up until about 5 years ago, I retired from psychiatry and been playing full-time again.
I found out a few hours ago that you were psychiatric, and then when I told my friend, he said, be careful, because if you are asking a psychiatric, maybe you are in danger. Do you think that I'm in danger?
No, absolutely not. And I'm not, even when I was practicing, I was never a psychoanalyst. And I think it's psychoanalysts who are more analyzed, but I don't do that. That's not the kind of psychiatry I was practicing. So, no.
And do you think there is a link between improvisation and the music that you play and the work that you did?
Yes, absolutely.
And what?
Okay, well, both involve intense listening and connection with the music, with others, with the audience. And that type of listening is integral to that experience. When there is that intense communication, there can be a lot of unexpected results, like people open up, right? They open up their hearts. They are open to change, and they're open to healing. So that, to me, there's a very similar connection. The other thing is the science. There is science behind the music, one other thing I would say is there's improvisation in both. Psychiatry, unlike, let's say, radiology or cardiology, some other specialty, there is a lot of improvisation, because each person is different and each session is different, each interaction. So we have tools that we work with, medications and certain psychotherapies, but there's an art to it. So there's a lot of improv.
And did something in your science help you, like a jazz musician, to find out?
I'm thinking, because that's a very deep question. And it's hard to put it into words, but I would say the range of personal experience that I've had as a psychiatrist in sharing people's lives, and that emotional experience definitely has broadened my range of emotional experience and feeling. And that, yes, definitely applies to playing music.
So the question is just intellectual, emotional, or spiritual? I would think that you will answer spiritual.
Well, I'll answer the spiritual first. I think it is, if the music is being played with this kind of openness that we're talking about, the music is playing us. We're open vessels for the music to come through us, where our ego is put aside. In that way, it's deeply spiritual, because there's something, a higher power, something transcendent that's occurring in that moment that can't be explained. It's just happening. And I'm receiving that and channeling that and being part of that experience. So, and then of course, the audience is a big part of that experience, because what we get back from them helps us then return. It becomes a full circle. Yes.
And what does improvisation learn you about human mentality?
Oh, that most of our, let's just say a lot of our problems, mentally speaking, can be from becoming too rigid in our thinking, too fixed, too defensive. And so the music helps to melt those boundaries, those defenses, and allows us to open up. And when that happens, there can be transformation. Now, it's not necessarily a happy thing. It could be that we're holding in grief, or we're holding in anger, emotions that we were not even aware that we were holding on to. But in those moments, we're allowed to open up and really see what's inside there. And then we can hopefully come to some healing with that.
Do you think that there is something like a creator or kind of positive energy in the universe?
Well, so that I don't believe that there's a God. No, I'm not religious in that sense. But I do practice Tai Chi, and I'm very much, I would say, a Taoist in my approach, which is that, yes, there's a life force in the universe. We call it Qi within the practice. So I do feel that there's this life force energy, and it connects us. It's within all of us. It's within the universe.
I was thinking like you have Catholic, you have Muslims, you have Buddhist, but if the creator or the energy force create human people, they didn't start making Catholics and then make the Muslims, and then so they were one thing, and then the human creatures, they divide themselves.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah. No, that's absolutely what I believe. I think that the intent of every religion is to open us up to higher, the higher parts of ourself and humanity, which is to love one another, to be accepting, open, to care for the weak and the poor, the vulnerable. But then the organized part of religion, I think, steps in and creates a power differential between the, let's say, the priest and the congregation. And then there, as we know throughout history, politics and leaders have abused religion for their own ends. And so we see that repeatedly throughout history. And that's where it becomes very much a weapon, actually, to then divide us. It's used to divide us, not to unite us. But I think underlying it, I agree with you, it's all a common human experience, to experience the transcendent and to feel connected with each other and with the universe.
But do you think it's a good idea if I try to convince the spiritual leaders to work together and to make a kind of plan to not make rockets to the moon or Venus, but just right away to heaven. So does everybody happy? And if it's not a racket, maybe it's a kind of adventure to look in yourself.
Well, I'm totally in agreement with that, but throughout history, the major religions have led us to wars, persecution, and division. They have not united us. But yes, that's absolutely what should happen, and I think the United Nations was started with that spirit of what's called Unitarian Universalism, which has a long tradition in the United States, Unitarian, and that I think is our only hope, and that was the hope that was there after World War II when the United Nations was created, to bring us together to be able to transcend these differences.
Sometimes I think also like artists and musicians, they are also a kind of spiritual leaders.
Absolutely, absolutely. That gets to what we started talking about in the very beginning, which is the role of the artist in society, and it's more needed than ever right now, because the powers that be want to steer us away from truth and from personal freedom of expression. And the arts are all about truth and freedom of expression and actualization, becoming an individual and not just part of the state, not a pawn, to be used.
Like a fixed machine.
Yeah. And so really what we're talking about is the survival of humanity, and especially with AI now, it's more and more threatened. Like when I was in the airport the other day, I saw a whole cafe that was run by a robot. There wasn't one human being.
Where was it?
This was in the airport in Barcelona.
Yeah.
And you go up to the window and there's a big robot, and there's not one human being. And this is what I'm afraid of, like this is happening in our American medical system where we're using AI more and more, so that the patient has a harder time to even access a human being. And when they do, very limited time and so forth. So, there's this dehumanization that's occurring at a rapid pace, and the arts are essential in so that people retain their humanity. This is why people come out to jazz clubs, right? They want to have that experience of connection, being not only listening to the music, but just relaxing, hanging out with the friends, right? And just being, not
I would like to make a cookbook from all the political leaders and to know what they like to eat and which kind of music that they like and how they spend their free time to relax and what is their interest in how do they do it. Do they play table tennis or do they listen to folklore or I don't know. So I think if you would know which interests political leaders would have, then you have a better inside view than how they were teach to and trained to talk.
Yeah, I would agree. I think one way is through food, because there you have a mixing of cultures and it goes beyond boundaries, and because when you experience food from another culture, it allows you to go outside of your boundaries.
Comfort zone.
So through food and music, dance, these are the. And in the United States, we have very interesting cultural intermixing around food, because we have, let's say, Vietnamese immigrants who settle in Texas, and they changed the kind of barbecue that's being served. A mixing of the cultures is really very hopeful. Fills me with a lot of hope when I see that happening.
I think like music and art, culture is the main jewel in humanity. And if you can focus on this everywhere, then it would be better than to listen to people trying to, how do you say it, integrate us.
Yeah. But what's great about music is it's a direct, immediate experience and gives, reaction. When you hear music and it moves you, you are exposed to a completely, different world. It takes you out of your world. I'm thinking of flamenco, for example. And then if it moves you, then you want to learn more about it. And then you realize, wow, artists and musicians are always crossing boundaries and creating culture. And I want to know more about that. And that opens people's minds. There's more than just the culture, in my neighborhood and what I was brought up with.
And do you think there is a connection or a difference between all the...
And that was the hope that was there after World War II when the United Nations was created, to bring us together to be able to transcend these differences.
Sometimes I think also like artists and musicians, they are also a kind of spiritual leaders.
Absolutely. That gets to what we started talking about in the very beginning, which is the role of the artist in society, and it's more needed than ever right now, because the powers that be want to steer us away from truth and from personal freedom of expression. And the arts are all about truth and freedom of expression and actualization, becoming an individual and not just part of the state, not a pawn, to be used.
Like a fixed machine.
Yeah. And so really what we're talking about is the survival of humanity, and especially with AI now, it's more and more threatened. Where, like when I was in the airport the other day, I saw a whole cafe that was run by a robot. There wasn't one human being.
Where was it?
This was in the airport in Barcelona.
Yeah.
And you go up to the window and there's a big robot, and there's not one human being. And this is what I'm afraid of. Like, this is happening in our American medical system, where we're using AI more and more, so that the patient has a harder time to even access a human being. And when they do, very limited time and so forth. So, there's this dehumanization that's occurring at a rapid pace, and the arts are essential in so that people retain their humanity. This is why people come out to jazz clubs, right? They want to have that experience of connection, being not only listening to the music, but just relaxing, hanging out with their friends, right? And just being, not
I would like to make a cookbook from all the to political leaders and to know what they like to eat and which kind of music that they like and how they spend their free time to relax and what is their interest in how do they do it. Do they play table tennis or do they listen to folklore or I don't know. So I think that if you would know which interests political leaders would have, then you have a better inside view than how they were taught and trained to talk.
Yeah, I would agree. I think one way is through food, because there you have a mixing of cultures and it goes beyond boundaries, and because when you experience food from another culture, it allows you to go outside of your boundaries. So through food and music, dance, these are the. And in the United States, we have very interesting cultural intermixing around food, because we have, let's say, Vietnamese immigrants who settle in Texas, and they changed the kind of barbecue that's being served. A mixing of the cultures is really very hopeful. Fills me with a lot of hope when I see that happening.
I think like music and art, culture is the main jewel in humanity, and if you can focus on this everywhere, then it would be better than to listen to people trying to, how do you say it, integrate us.
Yeah. But what's great about music is it's a direct, immediate experience and gives reaction. When you hear music and it moves you, you are exposed to a completely different world. It takes you out of your world. I'm thinking of flamenco, for example. And then if it moves you, then you want to learn more about it. And then you realize, wow, artists and musicians are always crossing boundaries and creating culture. And I want to know more about that. And that opens people's minds. Say that, there's more than just the culture, in my neighborhood and what I was brought up with.
And do you think there is a connection or a difference between all the different kinds of art, painting, poetry, writing, dancing, music?
Well, I think that music, of course, is especially jazz, is being created in the moment. And the audience is experiencing that for the first time. This music is being performed, and it will be different tomorrow. So that jazz is unique in that sense, but there's plenty of theater and dance that improvises as well. It uses improv. With painting, I just think that the experience of painting is more of a solitary one, right?
It's solitary?
Well, with music, we get to play with other musicians, and it's a communal experience. With painting, it's solitary, right? You're painting in the studio.
So with people on the street, I'm always improvising.
Ah, okay. Yeah, very, very interesting. So the experience on the street affects what you're going to paint?
I think so. I'm not busy with it, I'm just painting. So I start and then I work till I find something that I think it's not so bad, but I'm not busy with. I'm analyzing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I'm just focused to realize something that I can agree with. That's it.
would you sometimes have a conversation with someone on the street, and then that affects,
Can happen, yeah, it can happen.
and then that affects what you're painting?
If it's interesting and funny, maybe I use it, but yeah, no problem.
But you're improvising when you paint the doors. You don't go in with a sketch and you know exactly what you're going
I
to do.
never made a sketch in all my life.
It's fascinating.
No, it's boring.
Wow.
It's a lose of time.
So then your inspiration comes from just everything that's around you, and what's happening that day, and
Must
what
be
you
a
had for lunch, and
It must be a combination of everything. Sometimes it's not easy to do something. Sometimes go very quick. It's just you never know it till you are doing it.
well, that's very much like jazz, then. And
Strange thing. I
do you
have.
prefer that type of painting over?
Yes, of course. If I have, if somebody tell me what they want, that's for me 50% boring. Yeah.
And
Strange thing is also like if I I made a few books and then I paint on it, and then so somebody buy a book and then they said, oh, if you want, I can paint something, and then and then they like it, and I think, okay. I'm curious, why do they like it? Yeah, but after all the time I think, yes, it must be something because they like it.
how is it, or what role does showing your work play in a gallery, let's say, in terms of as an artist, how important is that experience for you?
I think it's important that you have the possibility to show your work to other people, because they are. You hear the reactions, and some people they are interesting and others not so interesting, but you learn a lot, and the people would tell you the most interesting things. That's the most interesting, and that's why you're doing work. Just to sit and to stock it at your home. But it's not a solution, I think. But I'm not into selling my work because I think it's your weapon to make bigger possibilities. But I'm also not, if you talk about galleries, most artists, they are just focused on galleries and on institutions that are already there, but I'm more interested to find new tactics to make new platforms, and I'm not against it, and if a gallery will ask me and it's interesting, normally I will say yes if I could get my own freedom. But I think if colleagues start talking about exhibitions in galleries and museums, and only that, then it's for me, it sounds a little bit like their mental death of things. So I think that's also why I paint cars on the street, even if they don't pay me, I do it. I paint my own car, and I'm thinking different things to always trying to find new ways outside of the system that are there to show your work.
That's fascinating. I really am glad that I was able to see one of your doors today. Actually,
Thank you.
Yeah, much better than just seeing it in a book.
See you where?
Much better to see it actually on the street rather than to see it in a picture.
Very nice way. If you're painting on the street, you get a lot of direct reaction.
Yeah, reaction.
So people they are. I call the police and you have to stop. And, And then he said, yeah, okay, let's call the police. And then I called the owner, and then then they have to realize that it's normal to paint their walls. Or sometimes they are. When there was a guy, he was going with his bicycle and he looked a little bit very strange, and then I think, no, I'm gonna hide me because I don't understand what he was doing, but he was standing before me, and then he stays there, and then I was looking like, what do you want? And then at the other side of the street there was a woman, and she's telling me, he wants that you paint his bicycle.
Oh.
Yes, you have to go. Then okay. Thank you very much for this interview.
It was my pleasure. Yeah. Now, I wish we could continue, but I have to go now and perform.
Okay, I would love to hear you play.
Oh. Thank you for...
These were the Cloudknitters, and now there will be a concert, but nobody will hear it now. At the Muze at 9 o'clock. Thank you very much, David.